I'm Anonda, Canadian. I'm the Arts and Culture Editor at Capilano University. Today, I'm here to talk about student protests within universities across Canada, and specifically further on about the CapU new guidelines regarding the protests. So student protests have played a significant role in shaping Canadian universities regarding Indigenous rights, racism, academic policy, campus infrastructure. In November of 1922, at the University of British Columbia, we have the protest named the Great Trek. The point of this protest was that UBC's Point Grey campus constructions was delayed, and the students were frustrated with the lack of progress and the poor learning conditions. And this played a very significant role as the earliest examples of student activism in British Columbia. The next protest was the Simon Fraser University protest of 1968. Transfer students from across BC colleges were not getting the equivalent academic credit at Simon Fraser University upon transferring. This issue impacted the academic progression for the transfer students. In November of 1968, approximately 180 students occupied 4 floors of SUV's administrative offices and lasted approximately 54 hours. The next protest was the Sir George Williams University protest of 1969 in Montreal. This pertained to the Black and Caribbean students accused a professor of discriminatory grading practices. In protest, the students organized and occupied the university's computer lab that lasted several weeks and gained national attention. The long-term outcome is that the university later apologized and acknowledged their failures in handling the situation and issued a public apology only decades later. The significance of this highlighted the systemic racism in higher education and the role of student activism in exposing it. Recently, in 2019-2020 year in BC, there was the Wet'suwet'en Solidarity Walkouts. This was ongoing conflict over Wet'suwet'en Nation land rights and pipeline development. Students across British Columbia organized walkouts in solidarity, including Capilano University. These actions included leaving classes, gathering on campuses, and public demonstrations. The focus was on Indigenous sovereignty, environmental concerns, and government accountability. Now overall, the student protests in Canada have addressed a wide range of issues across different time periods. Student activism remains an ongoing and evolving part of university culture. So how does this relate to the new CapU guidelines on protests? Well, these guidelines were introduced last year without any consultation with students or faculty who actually participate and organize protests. So when relating to the historical protests that we just covered, we're going to go over the guidelines that they have so kindly given us students. Number 1, limitation of space. So many historical student protests have relied on occupying central visible campus spaces, such as an example, the SFU students occupied the administrator's offices in 1968. These new guidelines allow CapU students to only protest in designated areas. This raises question on whether limiting location reduces visibility and impact of the protests. Number 2, disruption as a protest tool. Historical protests often involve disruption to draw attention, such as the SFU occupation disrupted the administrative operations. The CapU guidelines prohibit disruption of campus activities and access. This suggests a shift toward allowing protests only if it does not interfere with institutional operations, which defeats the whole purpose of a student protest. Number 3, use of authority and enforcement. Past protests have involved institutional or public or police response, such as the RCMP arresting 114 students at SFU in 1968. So the CapU guidelines allow security to issue trespass notices and involve with the authorities. Indicates continuancy in enforcement mechanisms, but within a more formalized policy structure. Number 4, control over protest methods. The CapU guidelines prohibit encampments and regulate tools like amplification, such as microphones. Number 5, the private property versus public discourse. CapU guidelines emphasize that the university is private property. But I also just want to note that as a young First Nations woman, there is no such thing as private property. We occupy and we live, work, and play, study on the unceded territories of the Lil'wat, Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Sechelt peoples. There is no such thing as private property. These new guidelines suggest a shift toward regulation and risk management for the university. So these raises questions about the role of universities as spaces for dissent and the balance between safety, order, and freedom of expression. In closing, the relationship between student protests and university regulation remains ongoing, and the policies such as CapU guidelines shape how future student activism may occur within these colonial institutions that we partake in. Once the colonial institution that we partake in and that we are actively part of, such as Capilano University, have a say in how we protest, they take away the meaning and the significance of it. They say this is what the meaning of it should be, not what you are doing.